Hello, everyone. This is The Clearing Episode 3. I'm Soyica Colbert, and I'll be your host. The Clearing, titled in honor of Toni Morrison and all the great Black women writers and healers that have paved the way, is a set of conversations in 3 episodes that explore the themes of Erika Dickerson-Despenza's play, Shadowland. This episode questions, in the wake of a disaster, how does one heal? With Imani Perry, the Hughes Rogers Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, Jack Moore, Director of New Artists at the Public Theater, Cara Page, Black queer feminist cultural memory worker, curator, and organizer, Lauren Whitehead, Shadowland dramaturgical consultant, and Erika Dickerson-Despenza, author of Shadowland, which is the first installment of a 10-play cycle traversing the Katrina diaspora. Imani, as crisis upon crisis unfolds, what are the tools, the practices, the rituals and traditions Black people in general and Black women specifically have developed for sustenance in dark times?
And part of the reason why the play is so moving is, for example, they have, there's a moment when Magali shouts the beginning of Indian Red, but one of the songs that the Mardi Gras Indians sing at the beginning and the end. And sort of the ritual performances of Mardi Gras itself, from a distance to see there's all this beauty and color and pageantry and it's carnivalesque, but in the content of the songs and even in the performance, you know, there's conflict, there's turmoil. There's a moment where Ruth is saying to Magali, you know, noting how she's figured out how to manage her life as dementia is taking over, and she has these cards, and one of them has the recipe for Cafe Brûlot, and I thought that was so profound because it's a coffee and brandy mix that has spices in it and an orange peel, and then it's set aflame. It's such a gorgeous metaphor for, like, you know, destruction. And it's also incredibly beautiful when it's lit, right? And, the taste is like, it's so characteristic of New Orleans flavors. It's performance, it's food, it's ritual. It's not ritual that, like, expunges everything, but sort of makes beauty in the midst of everything.
So I want to just bring back Erika's style guide, if you will, of how she writes the play, the juke joint writing style, right? That she's intentionally creating. I think of it very much in the same vein as the Hattie Gossets, the Endazaki Shanges. Like, Black people are so powerfully good at holding different vibrational pulls, right? And creating art that can manifest the cacophony of chaos, violence, colonization, and power, strength, resilience. Like, we could hold that cacophony, that imbalance of power as a polyrhythm and create amazing dissonant noise to represent and replicate the chaos of colonization and the manifestation of power, and in a survival resilient way.
That's Cara Page.
And so her writing is that. And the music, right? There's music. There's dissonant chords played throughout the play with different horns. Even when Ruth grabs the bone, these are not small things. And literally calling it the bone, the bones of my people, let me grab that off the wall before it floats down the river, right? These are all such intentional ways Erika is writing in that juke joint style. So writing is key. I think we got that down. Vibration, music. I am the great-granddaughter of jazz artists. I truly believe music will change us. It does change us. But I do think Black people understand our relationship to metaphors and humor, laughter, joy. Again, it's like how we slice through attempted genocide of our people. I think healing has also been often held by rituals, recipes, food, root work, the medicines we can make. There's a cultural reference to indigo. That is medicine, right? A plant that has been so over-processed. We're lucky we still have it on this planet. It's been overused and taken, right? And co-opted. But indigo is one example of a medicine of Southern Black and Indigenous people. And then, of course, other kinds of cultural work, the ability to create visual stimulatory art that changes our lives, changes our minds, and helps us to remember. And I think, as you've mentioned so beautifully, this is memory work. This play is memory work. That's the kind of lyrical writing that Black women in particular do in our writing. I think of Octavia Butler. I think of Toni Morrison. I think of Erika, lyrical roundabout, pulling from the past to move to the future. Again, that liminal space that can transport time.
We are joined by Jack Moore.
Shadowland for me is this sort of the layers of history of not just New Orleans, but Central City and Shadowland. The fact that this bar, this music club, stands on the grounds of an indigo plantation. And that is not ancient history. That is contemporary history. And Erika is one of the best writers I know at collapsing time and collapsing space.
Imani, what do you think of how time works in a play?
I have an analogy that I think helps me get at this question, right? And so, every time there's a new Black dance or a new Black dance craze, one of the things I think about is how we have a grammar, an extensive grammar that goes back millennia probably, an archive of movement, right? That gets reinvigorated, repurposed, and refreshed. We have this archive of ways of performing, of reflecting, of participating. There's, and that, I guess what the moment demands of us is we go back into the grammar or the archive and re-engage it, given the constraints and needs today, but also then it becomes a possibility for new imaginations, right? You go back, that actually, I think, triggers a kind of another set of creative possibilities, another set of imaginings. And that's why, it's so funny as we're in the era where people think a lot about Afrofuturism. And I sort of think that's the forever condition, right? There's always this sort of project, this futurity, but it also always is one which brings the ancestors, it brings the past, it brings the ghosts. And so so again, it's sort of the movement back and forth. It's not passive, it is always a kind of deliberate engagement. And that is a way of also confronting trauma, right? Trauma is the thing that repeats. It's the repetition of suffering that is beyond your control. And so to be deliberate about how to engage the past, to be deliberate about looking for ways that people created and connected in the past is to push back against trauma, right? With the creative. So yeah, it's an extraordinary work.
What I think is very special about Black people in particular, but for the majority of people of color and queer folks who have been innovating in moments of catastrophe, which happen all the time, is that we are 100% committed to exhibiting our humanity despite, right? And so the repertoire is full of our glorious humanity, regardless of whether the circumstances that we're living in are catastrophic or joyful.
That's Lauren Whitehead.
The ritual practice, I think, is about the process of reminding ourselves and enjoying for ourselves our humanity, even while the language and the catastrophes seek to dehumanize us all the time.
I think of Toni Morrison's essay, A Bench by the Road, in which she meditated on the fact and said there's no place where, I'm paraphrasing, where Black people can go to mourn slavery. There's not even a bench by the road.
Experiencing Shadowland, I thought about Dookie Chase in New Orleans, a restaurant, run by Leah Chase. It was a site of incredible food and civil rights organizing and ritual. And I think that Shadowland is rendered as such a kind of beautiful representation of those practices of healing, right? They're like oases, places of communal gathering and joy and play, and there's a lot of, one of the things I love about the play is that the sense of playfulness never goes away, which is just so characteristically Black and Southern, that even in the sort of most tragic situations, there's laughter, there's play, there's the laughter to keep from crying, there's the pleasure of human contact and intimacy, right? And that's, I think, that's the healing in the midst. And it's also an assertion of one's full humanity, right? It's a moment in the play where they are neglected. They think they might be rescued and they are not, right? And it's so, it brought tears to my eyes because it's that kind of dehumanization is a piece that I don't know. It's just, I can't think of another contemporary work of art where I felt that so sharply, right? And so, to actually be disregarded, treated as nothing more than a spectacle in a moment of extreme vulnerability, to insist upon your humanity by being in connection with others is so profound. That is a healing.
We are joined by Erika Dickerson-Despenza and Cara Page.
Macaulay says, lapping up luxury in the white-only hotels, which was every hotel except these bordellos and these small corner, back of the woods, hole-in-the-wall spaces, right? That we can come from such a place and create something more beautiful that is also communal, right? That is not just for this family or for capitalist gain, but that is for the building up of our people. And so I think that is healing when we can not simply repurpose a place, but when there is the spiritual healing and, right, like Mary Hooks, I think of this often in every single thing that I write. All right, Mary Hooks, formerly of Southerners on New Grounds, gave us the mandate, right? The mandate for Black people in this time is to avenge the suffering of our ancestors, to earn the respect of future generations, and to be willing to be transformed in the service of the work. What I am seeing when we talk about a place being healing is that part of what makes it healing, particularly in Shadowland, is that it is in part vengeance for the suffering of our ancestors. That Magali is a keeper of this legacy, but has also been able to turn what this particular land means for this family. That she has stewarded it in such a way that it does not mean bondage anymore, but that it is liberatory and it is in service to the community. And that it is her way of earning the respect of future generations of Despenzas. And Ruth may not necessarily see it that way. There's an honoring of the legacy, but it is like, oh, the way that I want to earn the respect of future generations is by claiming a greater degree of freedom, because that is my job, to be freer than you are, Mom, to be more myself, more embodied. What do I want? And how might that be bigger and different than what you and Daddy wanted or could do because of the times? That is also healing, right? The reclamation of self, the self-possession, especially for queer Black women of the South.
What I think we are always, as Black artists, challenged to construct or reconstruct or reimagine is, who are we if we are not defined by slavery, not defined by colonization, as property, as objects, as labor, to the white wealthy elite, to systems of oppression, that we are instead embodied for our own spiritual, cultural imagination? Like who will we become if it's, and how place can relate us to not being victims of place. I hope this is making sense. And that in Shadowland, they're not victims of a storm. They are witnesses. And I do think it is our role as Black artists. It's not an option for us in order to build an abolitionist Black future, for us to imagine ourselves outside of systems of oppression and violence and criminalization of our bodies. And Black artists have the role of witnessing. They thought they could take our imagination, right? They thought they could take our love and spiritual grace and divinity to create from slavery or genocide, but they didn't. We are still here creating and imagining and truth-telling. And that, to me, is a powerful, powerful resistance of our people.
Octavia Butler teaches us, above all else, that we have two options in apocalypse: adapt or die. And so while Candace and I are both very resistant to Zoom plays and really shifting all of our work to a digital platform when it was not created or intended for such platform, that these are the times right now. And if the work that we are doing really is urgent, really is timely, really has something to say about this current apocalyptic moment, then how do we share that content in these times? And so I think that, having collaborators who are living all over the country right now, incorporating music and all manner of sound that this particular work requires, even these ancillary interviews with scholars and cultural workers and organizers, that it is calling for us to adapt. And I think that that is the greatest lesson that I have come away with in this process and working with Candace in this particular medium. The care is different because we are on a digital platform and in the midst of a pandemic, and we were also recording during the coup. So it's like, how do we care for each other as Black women who are living through multiple apocalyptic moments, as our foremothers have, right? Like, I don't know a moment in time that wasn't apocalyptic for Black people, particularly Black women and non-binary folks. And so it's like, okay, how do we adapt in this moment? And how do we really see the moment as an opportunity for something else?
This has been The Clearing, Episode 3. The conversation included Imani Perry, the Hughes Rogers Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, Jack Moore, Director of New Artists at the Public Theater, Cara Page, Black queer feminist cultural memory worker, curator, and organizer, Lauren Whitehead, Shadowland dramaturgical consultant, Erika Dickerson-Despenza, playwright, and me, your host, Soyica Colbert, Idle Family Professor of African American Studies and Performing Arts at Georgetown University. Thanks for joining us, and if you haven't already, check out the play.